The discovery. The silence in the auction hall shattered as the Antiscard representative raised their hand. 500,000 credits. The collective gasp from the younger species echoed through the chamber. Jassa's knees nearly buckled. Even Ron's gelatinous form seemed to crystallize in shock. But before anyone could process this astronomical jump in price, the Marsun delegate's cybernetic interface pulsed with a soft blue light. 1 million credits. The auctioneer's gravity manipulator actually dropped from her nerveless fingers. Someone in the back of the hall made a sound like a dying engine. The Antiscard's crest rippled with what might have been amusement. 2 million. Jas felt lightheaded. These weren't numbers anymore. These were concepts, ideas of wealth that his mind couldn't properly grasp. He watched as his small piece of salvage, this curiosity from the void, became the focus of what was rapidly evolving into a bidding war between literal legends. The show representative's crystalline form shimmered with patterns of light that the translator interpreted as 5 million credits, and exclusive rights to any similar artifacts found in the region. The Vorlin's environmental suit hummed to life, its translation matrix converting the being's thoughts into words, 10 million credits, with no conditions or restrictions. The room fell silent. Even the Antiscard's crest stilled. 10 million credits could buy a small fleet of salvage ships. It could fund a colony. It could. 50 million credits. The voice came from the doorway, and every head turned. Standing there, encased in what looked like liquid metal that flowed around their form, was a progenitor. The oldest of the ancient races, the first to achieve spaceflight, the beings who had mapped the stars when most species were still perfecting fire. The central seat, the one that had remained empty, suddenly had an occupant. No one had seen the progenitor move. They were simply there, as if they had always been there, their liquid metal skin reflecting the light in impossible ways. This is not a negotiation, the progenitor continued, their voice somehow both gentle and absolute. The artifact will be transferred to our custody immediately. The payment will be processed through standard channels. Jas watched as his salvage, his ticket to a better life, was suddenly at the center of something far bigger than a simple auction. The progenitor's presence meant this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about history. The other ancients were silent, but their silence spoke volumes. Even they, the elder races of the galaxy, deferred to the progenitors. The auctioneer, her hands shaking, reached for her gavel. But before she could bring it down, a new voice spoke up. I believe, said Rance, his gelatinous form quivering with what Jas recognized as nervousness, that we should discuss what exactly this artifact is before any sale is finalized. All eyes turned to the scientist. Even the progenitor's liquid metal form seemed to focus on him. You see, Rance continued, his voice gaining strength, the solar scarring patterns aren't just strange. They're impossible. The metal shows evidence of exposure to a star that, by all our understanding of stellar evolution, shouldn't exist. At least, not anymore. The progenitor's form rippled. Explain. The patterns suggest exposure to a yellow dwarf star, but with characteristics that don't match any known star of that type. The radiation signature is unique. And the age, well, when I said the tests were inconclusive, what I meant was that they were impossible. The artifact isn't just old. It's older than any technological artifact we've ever found. Older than the first recorded spaceflight, the progenitor finished. Older than us. The revelation hit the room like a physical force. Jas felt his fourth eye begin to twitch. Older than the progenitors? That wasn't possible. They were the first. Everyone knew they were the first. The Antiscard's crest had gone completely still. The Marsun's cybernetics were pulsing with rapid patterns of light. The show's crystalline form had taken on a deep, midnight blue color that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The bid stands at 50 million credits, the auctioneer said weakly. The bid is withdrawn, the progenitor announced. This artifact is now a matter of galactic security. All records of its discovery will be sealed. All parties present will be bound by the silence protocols. Jas felt his dreams of wealth evaporating, but something else was replacing them. Something bigger. He looked at the artifact floating in its gravity field, really looked at it for the first time. What had they found out there in the void? What was this thing that could make the progenitors themselves break their legendary isolation? The progenitor turned to face him directly, their liquid metal form reshaping itself into something almost humanoid. Captain Jas, you and your crew will be compensated fairly for your discovery. But more importantly, you will be needed for what comes next. What comes next? Jas asked, his voice barely a whisper. The search, the progenitor said. This artifact is not unique. It is part of a network, a breadcrumb trail left behind by someone who came before. Before all of us. And now, after all these eons, we have finally found the first piece. The room erupted into chaos as the implications sank in. A civilization older than the progenitors. A network of artifacts waiting to be found. But Jas barely heard any of it. He was looking at the artifact, at its simple, elegant design, at the mysteries it contained. And he was wondering, for the first time, if maybe some dreams were bigger than mere wealth. The progenitor's next words confirmed it. Captain Jas, how would you like to help us find Earth? The revelation. Earth? The word felt strange on Jas's tongue, alien despite the translator's best efforts to make it sound natural. What's Earth? The progenitor's liquid metal form shifted, creating patterns that somehow conveyed both excitement and ancient sorrow. Earth is a myth, a legend, a story that even we had dismissed as fantasy. Until now. The auction hall had been cleared of all but the most essential personnel. The other ancients remained, their usual air of aloof superiority replaced by an almost childlike curiosity. Even the Antiscard's characteristic arrogance seemed diminished in the face of this revelation. According to stories passed down through countless generations, the progenitor continued, Earth was the cradle of a species that achieved spaceflight long before us. So long before that by the time we first looked up at the stars with understanding, they were already gone. Ronst's gelatinous form rippled with skepticism. But that's impossible. The progenitors were the first. Everyone knows this. It's not just historical fact, it's written into the very fabric of our understanding of technological progression. Is it? The progenitor's form shifted again, projecting a holographic display into the center of the room. The artifact floated there, but now they could see it in a new light, its structure laid bare by scans that went far deeper than anything Ronst's equipment could manage. Look here, the progenitor indicated a series of markings that Jas had previously dismissed as mere scratches. These aren't random patterns of wear. They're writing. Writing? Alessa leaned forward, her pilot's eyes trained to spot patterns in the chaos of space. I don't recognize the script. You wouldn't. None of us do. It's not in any known language, ancient or modern. But the structure, the mathematical precision of it, it's undeniably a form of communication. The Vorlin's environmental suit hummed as it processed this information. You're suggesting that this artifact, this piece of technology that predates our oldest civilizations, was left behind deliberately. As a message? Not just a message, the progenitor's form rippled with excitement. A map. A guide. The first piece in a trail that leads to Earth. The show's crystalline form pulsed with colors that the translator interpreted as skepticism and fascination in equal measure. But why? Why leave such a trail? And why has it taken us so long to find it? Because, the progenitor said, we weren't meant to find it until now. The positioning of this artifact, the specific type of star it was exposed to, even the very metal it's made from, everything about it was calculated. This isn't just ancient technology. It's a test. Jas felt a chill run down his spine. A test? For what? To see if we were ready. Ready to follow the trail, ready to handle what we might find at the end of it. The progenitor turned to face the assembled group. The beings who left this artifact, these humans as they called themselves, they didn't just vanish. They ascended. The word hung in the air like a physical thing. Ascension was a theoretical concept, a hypothetical stage of technological and cultural development so advanced that it transcended the physical realm entirely. It was the stuff of philosophical debates and late-night speculation among drunk xenoarchaeologists. But that's just theory, Rance protested. There's never been any evidence that ascension is actually possible. Until now, the progenitor corrected. This artifact isn't just a marker or a message. It's proof. Proof that a species achieved what we thought impossible. And they left us breadcrumbs to follow, not just to their homeworld, but to understanding how they did it. The implications were staggering. If this was true, if humans had really achieved ascension and left behind a path for others to follow, it would rewrite everything they thought they knew about the universe. So what now? Jas asked, trying to wrap his mind around the enormity of what he was hearing. Now, the progenitor said, we begin the search. But we must move quickly. We weren't the only ones waiting for this moment. As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The Martian cybernetics flashed urgent patterns of light. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Energy signatures match Void Clan vessels. Jas felt his blood run cold. The Void Clans were the bogeymen of civilized space, remnants of ancient races who had rejected technological progression in favor of a darker path. They were pirates, raiders, and worse, they were true believers in their own twisted philosophy. They know, the Antiscard's crest rippled with concern. Someone leaked the discovery. Of course they know, the progenitor's form solidified into something more battle-ready. They've been waiting too. Watching. The race begins now. Race? Alessa asked, already pulling up ship diagnostics on her neural interface. Yes, the progenitor confirmed. A race to find Earth. A race to discover the secrets of ascension. And most importantly, a race to ensure that those secrets don't fall into the wrong hands. The station shuddered as the first shots were fired. In the distance, they could hear the sound of boarding parties attempting to breach the hull. Captain Jas, the progenitor turned to him. Your ship. Is it ready for immediate departure? Jas looked at his crew, saw the mix of fear and excitement in their various faces. The Rust Merchant wasn't much, but she was fast and she was tough. Most importantly, she was theirs. She's ready, he confirmed. But where are we going? The progenitor's form shifted, revealing a star chart that none of them had ever seen before. The artifact contains coordinates. Encrypted, hidden in the very atomic structure of the metal. We've decoded the first set. They point to a system that shouldn't exist, in a part of space that everyone thinks is empty. The hollow, Rance whispered. The vast region of space that seemed to contain nothing, no stars, no planets, nothing but endless void. Every survey had confirmed it was empty, and yet. Yes, the progenitor said. The humans hid their trail in the one place no one would think to look. A region of space that every scan shows as empty, because the humans made it appear that way. More alarms. More impacts. The station's defenses were holding, but they wouldn't last forever. Make your choice quickly, Captain, the progenitor urged. The Void Clans will not be the only ones coming. Every power in the galaxy will want this secret. Some will try to claim it for themselves. Others will try to destroy it. The choice of who to trust, who to follow, that's why the humans left the artifacts where they did. The journey itself is part of the test. Jas looked at his crew again, saw the same decision in their eyes that he felt in his hearts. They had started this. They had found the first piece. Whatever came next, they were part of it now. The Rust Merchant is ready, he declared. But we're not just transportation. We found this thing. We're part of this now, all the way. The Progenitors' form rippled with what might have been approval. Then let's go. The race to Earth begins now. As they rushed through the chaos of the station toward the docking bay, Jas couldn't help but wonder what other secrets waited out there in the void. What other impossible things would they find on this journey? And somewhere, in the back of his mind, he wondered if the humans were watching, waiting to see who would pass their test, who would be worthy to follow in their footsteps, to achieve what they had achieved. The race to Earth had begun. And nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same, last edited 1 minute ago. The Hollow. The Rust Merchant burst into real space with all the grace of a drunken Vorlon at a diplomatic function. Alarms blared throughout the ship as systems struggled to compensate for the unusual gravitational conditions of the Hollow. Status report. Jas barked, his 4 eyes scanning multiple readouts simultaneously. We're alive. Alessa offered from the pilot's seat, her tentacles dancing across the control surfaces. Which is more than I expected given that we just jumped into a region of space that technically doesn't exist. The Progenitors' liquid metal form shifted, creating complex patterns that their sensors interpreted as deep thought. They had been silent for most of the journey, their presence both reassuring and unsettling. The Hollow is more than just empty space, they finally said. It's a construct. A vast, artificial void created by technology we still don't understand. Ron's gelatinous form bubbled with excitement as he studied the sensor readings. The readings are impossible. According to every instrument we have, we're nowhere. Not just empty space, but a complete absence of everything. And yet, Jas gestured at the main viewport, there's that. That was a star. A yellow dwarf, burning bright against the impossible blackness of the Hollow. It shouldn't exist. It couldn't exist. But there it was. The humans didn't just hide their trail, the Progenitor mused. They created an entire secret region of space to hide it in. The scope of such an engineering project. Incoming. Avarius's gills flapped in alarm as new contacts appeared on his communications array. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Void Clan signatures. How did they follow us? Alessa demanded, already plotting evasive maneuvers. They didn't need to, the Progenitors' form rippled with concern. They already knew where to go. They've been waiting for someone to find the first artifact, to confirm the legends were true. The pursuing ships were unlike anything Jas had ever seen. Where most spacecraft followed some basic principles of design, these vessels looked wrong. They were all angles that shouldn't work, surfaces that seemed to bend reality around them. Those aren't normal Void Clan ships, Rance observed, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his fear. The energy signatures, they're using technology based on the same principles as the human artifact. They've found others, the Progenitor confirmed. Over the millennia, they've discovered pieces of the puzzle. But never enough to locate Earth. Never enough to understand the full picture. Until now. The Rust Merchant shuddered as the first energy weapons fire sliced through the void. Alessa's piloting skills were legendary among the salvage community, but even she couldn't dodge forever. We need options. Jas shouted. Preferably ones that don't end with us being vaporized. The star, the Progenitor suddenly announced. It's not just a marker. It's a key. Everyone turned to look at their metallic companion. The Progenitor's form was shifting rapidly now, processing data at speeds their organic minds could barely comprehend. The humans didn't just leave breadcrumbs, they continued. They left tools. Weapons. Defenses. This entire region of space is one giant mechanism, waiting to be activated. How? Jas demanded as another blast rocked the ship. The artifact. The writing isn't just a message or coordinates. It's code. An activation sequence. But it needs to be positioned correctly, aligned with the star at precisely the right moment. Ron's form rippled with sudden understanding. The solar scarring. It's not damage, it's a template. The artifact needs to be exposed to the star's radiation in a specific way. More ships were appearing now. Not just Void Clan vessels, but others. The Antiscard's sleek cruisers, Marsun battle platforms, vessels representing every major power in the galaxy. The race was truly beginning. Alessa, Jas made a decision. Get us as close to that star as you can without cooking us. Are you insane? She shot back, even as her tentacles were already plotting the course. At this range, the radiation will fry half our systems. Better than letting the Void clans fry all of them, he countered. Rance, get the artifact ready. Everyone else, hold on to something. The Rust Merchant dove toward the star, its ancient engines screaming in protest. Behind them, the fleet of pursuers scattered, unable to follow them so close to the stellar surface. Now what? Alessa asked through gritted teeth as she fought to keep the ship stable against the solar winds. The Progenitors' form had become almost crystalline, refracting the star's light in complex patterns. The artifact needs to be exposed. The codes need to be transmitted directly into the star's photosphere. You want us to dump our priceless ancient artifact into a star? Jas's fourth eye was twitching again. No, the Progenitor's form shifted again, becoming something more determined. I need to take it in myself. My form can withstand the radiation long enough to complete the sequence. Before anyone could protest, the Progenitor had already moved. Their liquid metal form flowed through the ship's systems, emerging from an external port with the artifact encased within them. The crew watched in awe as the Progenitor's form stretched out toward the star, becoming a long, silvery tendril that seemed to defy physics itself. The artifact began to glow, its ancient markings lighting up one by one. Energy spike. Rance called out. The star, it's changing. The yellow dwarf surface began to ripple, patterns of light and darkness spreading across its face like oil on water. The pursuing ships had regrouped, weapons charged, but they too seemed transfixed by the spectacle. Then everything changed. The star's light shifted, becoming something other than light. The space around them seemed to fold, reality itself bending as ancient mechanisms awakened. In the midst of it all, the Progenitor's form blazed like a newborn sun, the artifact at its heart pulsing with power that defied comprehension. When the light faded, when reality settled back into something their minds could process, everything had changed. The star was gone. But in its place. By all the ancient gods, Alessa whispered. Where the star had been, a vast structure now hung in space. A station? A ship? A city? It was impossible to tell. Its architecture was like nothing they had ever seen, its surface covered in the same writing as the artifact. The Progenitor's form flowed back into the ship, the artifact still intact within them. Their usual smooth surface was scarred and pitted from the exposure to the star's heart, but they seemed almost excited. The second waypoint, they announced. The humans left more than just artifacts. They left entire hidden structures, waiting to be awakened. And this one. A new signal began broadcasting from the structure, a message that somehow transmitted itself directly into their minds, bypassing all known forms of communication. Welcome, a voice that wasn't a voice said. You have passed the first test. Are you ready for the second? The race for Earth had just become something far more complex than anyone had imagined. And somewhere out in the impossible void of the hollow, other secrets waited to be discovered, other tests waited to be passed. The question was, were they ready for what those tests would reveal? The second test. The human structure hung in space like a dream made manifest, its impossible architecture defying everything they thought they knew about engineering. The pursuing fleet had fallen silent, weapons powered down as every ship's crew tried to process what they were seeing. Are you ready for the second test? The question echoed in their minds again, patient but insistent. Jas looked at his crew, then at the progenitor, whose liquid metal form was still recovering from its solar plunge. Do we have a choice? There are always choices, the voice that wasn't a voice responded. The humans understood this better than most. Choice is what defines sentience. What defines worthiness? The structure's surface began to shift, sections moving with liquid grace to reveal an opening. An invitation. Multiple ships are powering up their engines, Avarius reported, his gills fluttering nervously. Everyone's making their choice. Indeed, the fleet was splitting. Some vessels were turning away, retreating to the edge of the hollow. Others were moving forward, weapons hot, clearly intent on taking the structure by force. And a very few, were holding position, watching, waiting. The progenitor's form rippled with what might have been amusement. The test begins before we even enter the structure. The humans are already sorting us. Sorting us? Alessa asked, her tentacles dancing across the controls as she maintained their position. Those who run, those who fight, and those who think, the progenitor explained. The humans were master strategists. Every action reveals character. A massive blast of energy suddenly erupted from one of the Void Clan vessels, aimed directly at the structure. But before it could impact, the beam simply ceased to exist. Not deflected, not absorbed, just gone, as if that section of space had decided that energy weapons were no longer part of its physics. Interesting, Rance bubbled, his scientific curiosity overriding his caution. The structure isn't just protected. It's rewriting local spacetime to eliminate threats. Your vessel has demonstrated patience, the voice addressed them directly. You may approach. Jas took a deep breath. Alessa, take us in. Nice and slow. The rust merchant glided toward the opening, its ancient hull looking particularly shabby next to the gleaming perfection of the human structure. As they passed through the entrance, reality seemed to shift. Colors became sounds, sounds became textures, and for a moment, every crew member experienced what it might be like to perceive reality through entirely different senses. When their perception stabilized, they found themselves in a vast chamber that seemed to stretch forever in all directions. The walls, floor, and ceiling were covered in constantly shifting patterns of light and shadow, forming and reforming into complex mathematical equations. Mathematics, the progenitor observed, their form rippling with excitement. The universal language. The humans are establishing a baseline for communication. But these equations, Rance's gelatinous form was practically vibrating as he studied the patterns. They're wrong. Or rather, they're right in ways that shouldn't be possible. They're describing physics that don't exist. Can't exist. Cannot exist yet, the voice corrected. The equations are not a description. They are a prophecy. A roadmap to what your species might become. The patterns suddenly coalesced into a single, massive display. It showed a series of images, a planet, blue and green, orbiting a yellow star. Cities rising, falling, rising again. A species reaching for the stars, failing, trying again, succeeding. And then. Earth, the progenitor whispered. We're seeing Earth's history. But the images didn't stop there. They showed something else. Something that made even the progenitor's liquid metal form freeze in shock. They showed the end. Not a violent end, not destruction or war or natural disaster. They showed transcendence. They showed an entire species making a choice, a deliberate decision to become something else, something more. The humans didn't die out, Jas realized. They didn't just achieve spaceflight before anyone else. They became energy, the progenitor finished. Pure consciousness. They transcended physical form entirely. And now you understand the true nature of the second test, the voice said. Knowledge is not enough. Technology is not enough. The question is, What will you do with this knowledge? As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. Outside, the Void Clan ships had begun attacking each other, their crews driven mad by the desire to be the first to claim the human legacy. The other vessels were choosing sides, alliances forming and breaking in moments. The violence you see outside, the voice commented, is one possible response to revelation. Fear. Greed. The desire to possess truth rather than understand it. But you have shown another way. The patterns on the walls shifted again, forming into complex sequences that seemed to burn themselves into their minds. These are the coordinates to the next waypoint, the voice explained. But more importantly, they are the key to understanding the first fundamental law of transcendence: unity is not uniformity. The progenitors' form rippled with sudden understanding. That's why our ship was chosen. Look at us, different species, different philosophies, working together not because we're the same, but because we're different. The humans didn't want successors who would all think alike. They wanted species who could maintain their individuality while working together, Rance finished. Because transcendence isn't about becoming one thing. It's about becoming everything while still remaining yourself. Outside, the battle was intensifying. Ships were being destroyed, their crews learning too late that violence was the wrong answer to the human legacy. You must hurry, the voice urged. The coordinates will lead you to the final waypoint. But be warned, the third test is the hardest. It is not enough to understand the path to transcendence. You must be willing to walk it. The chamber began to shift, reality bending around them once again. But before they were returned to normal space, the voice left them with one final message. The humans did not leave this trail to find worthy successors. They left it to create them. Everything you have experienced, every challenge you have faced, has been shaping you, preparing you. The question is, for what? As the Rust Merchant emerged from the structure, its systems now containing knowledge that would revolutionize their understanding of physics, Jas couldn't help but wonder about that final question. What were they being prepared for? What final truth waited at the end of this journey? The coordinates beckoned, promising answers. But first, they had to survive the chaos their discovery had unleashed upon the galaxy. The race for Earth had become something far more profound than a mere search for ancient artifacts. It had become a race for the future of consciousness itself. The final truth. The coordinates led them to the edge of the hollow, to a place where the artificial void met natural space in a boundary that shouldn't have been possible. The Rust Merchant sensors were registering readings that made Rance's gelatinous form twist itself into shapes that probably indicated either extreme excitement or severe indigestion. The barrier between the hollow and normal space, he explained, his voice bubbling with enthusiasm, it's not just a boundary. It's a lens. A lens? Jas's fourth eye twitched. A lens for what? The progenitor's liquid metal form had taken on a crystalline quality, refracting light in ways that seemed to bend reality itself. Not what, they said softly. When? The space before them began to shift, the boundary between the hollow and normal space becoming something else, something that made their minds ache to look at directly. It was as if reality itself was being peeled back, revealing layers of existence they were never meant to see. Multiple contacts. Avarius called out, his gills flapping in alarm. The surviving ships from the fleet, they've found us. Indeed, the vessels that had survived the battle at the human structure were emerging from hyperspace around them. But something was different. The weapons that had blazed so eagerly before remained dormant. Even the Void Clan ships, their impossible geometries still managing to hurt the eye, seemed hesitant. They understand now, the progenitor observed. The humans didn't just leave us technology or knowledge. They left us a choice. And that choice must be made together, or not at all. As if in response to these words, the boundary before them crystallized into something their minds could almost comprehend. It was a window, a portal, a gateway to Earth, Alessa whispered, her tentacles frozen on the controls. Through the temporal lens, they could see it. A planet, blue and green and beautiful, orbiting a yellow star that looked so much like the one they'd encountered in the hollow. But this wasn't just an image or a recording. This was Earth as it had been, preserved in a moment of time like an insect in amber. The final test, the now familiar voice that wasn't a voice, echoed in their minds. Are you ready to understand? The Progenitors' form rippled with sudden realization. The hollow, it's not just a hidden region of space. It's a template. A pattern left behind to show us how to create our own. Yes, the voice confirmed. The humans did not merely achieve transcendence. They learned to fold space and time itself, to create pockets of reality that operated under different rules. The hollow is both their legacy and their gift. The temporal lens expanded, showing them more. They saw Earth's history playing out in real time, the rise of human civilization, their first stumbling steps into space, their failures, their triumphs. But more importantly, they saw what came after. They didn't leave, Rance observed, his scientific mind racing to process what he was seeing. They're still here. They're everywhere. The images showed them the truth. The humans hadn't abandoned the galaxy when they transcended. They had become part of its very fabric. The void between stars, the space between atoms, the gap between thoughts, they were there, watching, waiting, guiding. The tests, Jas realized, they weren't about finding Earth at all, were they? No, the voice agreed. They were about proving you were ready to understand why Earth needed to be found. The humans didn't leave this trail to lead you to their past. They left it to lead you to your future. The temporal lens shifted again, showing them possibilities. Futures where species remained trapped in physical form, bound by the limitations of matter and energy. And futures where they followed the human path, where they learned to transcend not by abandoning their individuality, but by embracing it in new ways. The third test is not a test of knowledge or cooperation, the voice explained. It is a test of vision. Can you see beyond the physical? Can you understand that consciousness itself is not bound by form or time? The other ships were moving closer now, but not in aggression. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy, even the Void clans, drawn together by a truth bigger than their differences. The humans didn't ascend alone, the Progenitors' form rippled with wonder. They found a way to preserve their world, their moment of transcendence, as a beacon. A proof that it could be done. And now? Now you must choose, the voice confirmed. Not just your crew, not just your ship, but all of you. The humans understood that transcendence cannot be achieved in isolation. It requires a harmony of consciousness, a unity born not of conformity but of celebrated diversity. The temporal lens began to pulse, its light spreading to encompass all the assembled ships. Within that light, something impossible happened. For a brief moment, every being, every consciousness present, touched the state of existence the humans had achieved. They felt what it was to be energy and matter at once, to exist in all moments simultaneously, to be both individual and infinite. When the light faded, when they returned to their normal forms, everything had changed. The knowledge the humans had left behind wasn't just information or technology. It was a seed, planted in the fertile soil of their combined consciousness. The race is over, the voice said softly. But the journey is just beginning. Earth remains as it was, preserved in its moment of transcendence, a testimony to what is possible. The questions you must ask yourselves now are, what will you become? And how will you help others find their own path to transcendence? The Rust Merchant Systems hummed with new energy, its ancient hull now containing knowledge that would revolutionize their understanding of reality itself. But more importantly, its crew, and all those who had witnessed the final truth, now carried within them the beginning of something new. So, Jas said, looking at his crew, at the assembled ships, at the gateway to humanity's past and their own future, what do we do now? The Progenitors' form shifted into something that might have been a smile. Now. Now we begin the real work. The humans showed us the path, but we must walk it in our own way. The race to find Earth was never about reaching a destination. It was about becoming ready for the journey that comes after, Alessa finished. As the temporal lens began to fade, as the boundary between the hollow and normal space reasserted itself, one final message echoed in their minds. Welcome to the next stage of evolution. The humans will be watching, waiting, hoping. Make them proud. The race to find Earth had ended. But the race to follow in humanity's footsteps, to achieve what they had achieved while remaining true to their own natures, was just beginning. And somewhere, in the space between spaces, in the thoughts between thoughts, the consciousness that had once been humanity smiled. The legacy of Earth would live on, not as a memory of what had been, but as a promise of what could be. The cradle of humanity had become the crucible of the galaxy's future. And in the end, that had been the point all along.